That's not how international law works, Cathy. There are rules to war. No matter what each side thinks of the other, there are rules. And the rules say you cannot attack hospitals. You cannot kill children.
Yeah.
You cannot jeopardize UN buildings. You cannot shoot at them. You cannot target them with artillery shelling.
Yeah, no,
Those
I
are the rules
appreciate,
war.
of course, I
Israel has
appreciate
broken
all of
every
that.
one of them.
We're joined now by Nour Odeh, who's a former spokeswoman for the Palestinian Authority, speaking to us from Ramallah in the West Bank. Good afternoon to you, Nour.
Good afternoon, Cathy.
We've had confirmation that some Palestinian detainees have been released. You hope that it's the first of many, do you?
Well, of course, they haven't been released yet. I just received note that the Red Cross has them now and will be handing them over in Batunia, a town near Ramallah here. So their families are waiting for them. They've been waiting all that time.
Right. And of course, an initial 50 Israeli hostages will be released in the coming days. We've seen the first of them now on Israeli home soil. Would you hope that the ceasefire is extended potentially for 10 days, as has been under discussion, so that more than those 50s can be released?
Well, I'm hoping, of course, that the ceasefire would be extended. I'm hoping that a permanent ceasefire would be reached. Gaza right now is the most dangerous place on earth to be a child, according to UNICEF. We have 7,000 Palestinians missing under the rubble, 6,000 children already dead, already killed in these Israeli attacks. So I think the only people who think that more of that would bring any kind of solution to anything I just don't understand what their logic is.
Well, of course, the Israelis say that the surest way of getting a permanent ceasefire is to release all of those hostages.
Right. And the only way that those hostages have been released is to actually engage in dialogue through the mediators, namely Qatar and Egypt. Right now, the human cost of the Israeli war on Gaza, on the population, which Israel still occupies under international law, has been absolutely devastating, unacceptable by any measure. About 15,000 people killed, the majority of them women and children. That is not
to prevent more of that carnage. To prevent more of that carnage, you'd urge Hamas to get back round the negotiating table as soon as this initial wave of hostages is released.
Yes, but really the party that didn't want to negotiate was Israel, just to be clear on the facts. This deal that we're seeing now today implemented was on the table 5 weeks ago. We could have been here 5 weeks ago, but we weren't, because there is a right-wing Israeli government that is in domestic crisis and that needs to show that it can destroy and flatten Gaza.
But of course, they'd say that their key aim was to destroy Hamas because Hamas launched the 7th of October attack. You can understand their reasoning there.
No, I can't, because they've done a miserable job at destroying anything except the civilian population and the civilian infrastructure. They've deconstructed the health sector. They've destroyed hundreds of schools. They've killed thousands of children and thousands of women. None of those
because
are
Hamas
acceptable.
Are using. Yeah, sure. No, I understand completely your condemnation of civilian deaths, of course. But you know, Hamas is using the hostages as human shields, so it can't possibly destroy Hamas without endangering its hostages. No country is going to do that.
You're talking about the hostages.
I'm saying that Hamas is using the hostages as a human shield, and therefore Israel can't achieve its military objective without jeopardizing the lives of those hostages.
Well, how does that relate to the thousands of Palestinians killed? You're saying that Israel's campaign must jeopardize the safety of the Israelis held captive.
No. My question to you was about how Hamas could be destroyed, as Israel's goal is, without the easiest way for Hamas to ensure its own future is to release those hostages.
Well, Hamas isn't just some, a few people, a group of bandits. This is a social movement that has existed for over 30 years. It doesn't just exist in Gaza. The declared goal of Israel of crushing and eliminating or annihilating Hamas, as we've heard, is simply unrealistic. The more realistic application of what Israel's intentions are is what we see on the ground. We heard Israeli officials saying they wanted to flatten Gaza, to turn it into a city of tents. They were more concerned about destruction than accuracy. Those were the statements of Israeli officials, and that's exactly what we see on the ground. That's the accurate assessment of what Israel is intending to do in Gaza. That they're crushing the civilians, bringing them to the brink of starvation, displacing 1.7 million, and putting everybody in a state of crisis. This is a global crisis, and the world needs to make sure that it ends today and not a week or two or God knows when from now.
But my point is that Hamas, in control of Gaza, has endangered its own civilians through its own actions.
That's not how international law works, Cathy. There are rules to war. No matter what each side thinks of the other, there are rules. And the rules say you cannot attack hospitals. You cannot kill children.
Yeah.
You cannot jeopardize UN buildings. You cannot shoot at them. You cannot target them with artillery shelling.
Yeah, no,
Those
I
are the rules
appreciate,
of war.
of course,
Israel
I appreciate
has broken
all of
every
that.
one of them.
Of course, I appreciate all of that. And I put those points, exactly those points, to the IDF spokesperson. Whenever we get them on, we always do that. But my point is that Hamas is endangering its own people through its own actions. You're a former spokeswoman for the Palestinian Authority. You presumably don't defend Hamas's actions that have endangered your own citizens in Gaza.
I have no affiliation at this point, neither to the PA nor to Hamas.
I said you're a former spokeswoman.
Yeah. I'm just clarifying. I was the spokesperson 11 years ago, and I don't have any official affiliation. I'm a progressive feminist, so I am far, far away from the political and the social agenda of any religious group.
So you would accept, would you, that Hamas has contributed to the endangering of women and children in Gaza because of its actions?
No, I wouldn't put it that way, because I cannot abandon the larger context that the Palestinian people are under occupation, that Israel has obligations towards the population in Gaza and in the West Bank. It has violated that obligation, not just after October the 7th, but before October the 7th. Gaza has been under a blockade for 17 years. That blockade was illegal from day one, and it continued for 17 years, choking life and choking hope out of Gaza. And that was another pervasive violation of Palestinian rights and international law. That larger context, and the fact that nobody intervened and nobody stopped it, nobody gave Palestinians a political horizon to look forward to, a promise of freedom that they deserve, that they're entitled to. That's what got us here. And that is what needs to change.
Well, here's some context for the October the 7th attack as well, because, that obviously brought tragedy to Israel, but it brought tragedy to the Palestinian people too, didn't it? And I wonder whether you think that was a tragic miscalculation by Hamas, because it has brought this destruction on Gaza.
Well, again, I don't start my assessment of the situation in Gaza or in Palestine on October the 7th. Situation in Palestine, in Gaza, made it to the world headlines on October the 7th because of that large attack. But that doesn't mean that the situation for Palestinians was easy or tolerable or acceptable by any measure. Maintaining a regime of military occupation, of oppression, of dispossession and apartheid in Palestine, in the West Bank and Gaza, was unacceptable and unbearable. There was no political horizon. You have a right-wing government in Israel that has in its political program a promise to crush any hope of Palestinian statehood. That is the context. That's the background. That's how we got here, where there was no hope, no horizon to look forward to, and a world too busy, too irresponsible to pay attention and to stop severe violations of human rights and international law at the hands of Israel, that again has clear obligations under international law towards the Palestinians it occupies against their will.
But was October the 7th, or was it not, both a tragedy and a miscalculation by Hamas because of what has happened to the Palestinian people since?
We're way past that. And to suggest, Cathy, that
we're in the middle of it now. Gaza is being flattened.
We are way past that, because you cannot keep going back to October the 7th and to pretend as if that is in any way a justification for what Israel is doing to the
That's not what I'm.
Palestinians
That's not what
in
I'm
Gaza.
asking. That's not what I'm
It is.
asking at all.
Well,
I'm saying, was it both a
ultimately,
tragedy and a miscalculation, given what has happened in Gaza since, and the
but
horrendous tragedies that have been inflicted
ultimately,
on the Palestinian people since?
ultimately, that's what your question suggests, that somehow there's a justification that Israel can extend about killing civilians, about destroying infrastructure, about attacking universities and schools and hospitals. There isn't. There isn't. There is no justification for genocide, no matter how tragic and how violent and how unacceptable any event preceding it was. That's just the clear fact of it.
No,
You
I'm
cannot,
not.
you
I'm
cannot
not
excuse
remotely.
the genocide happening
No,
now
I never
because
used the
Israel went
word.
through a
I never
tragedy.
used the word justification, and you know that. Just to pick you up
No,
on that point.
I
But
said your
let's
question
look.
implies it.
Well,
That's what I
it
said.
didn't imply it, and I didn't use that word. But let's look to the future, because you talking about future hope. What happens in this conflict now? You know, is the two-state solution still something, a dream perhaps for the future that should be kept alive?
Well, the alternative to Palestinians having a state of their own would be one democratic state for everybody, and I think that is not a scenario any a political party in Israel is ready to talk about. Palestinians need their right to self-determination to be respected and materialized, and so in the context of the internationally endorsed solution, yes, not just to be kept alive, but to have it materialize. I don't see, regrettably, right now that there's enough of an international push, an international commitment for that to happen. But I don't think that there is a different way that the world can go about making sure that this catastrophe doesn't repeat. And that Palestinians are not ignored again until another tragedy happens, and that the suffering that people are going through right now does not repeat. People have to be, these actors, these international actors have to be responsible. They have to do it differently this time. The playbook of the past 30 years was miserably a failure, and they need to change it into something a lot more actionable and in a time frame that is achievable quickly, and where all parties are held to account for violating that commitment to end the occupation.
Nour Odeh, thank you very much for joining us. Former spokeswoman for the Palestinian Authority there, speaking from Ramallah in the West Bank.